Hello patrons, it's Johannes from Noisebud, and this video is about a new plugin called Fras, which means, you know, the sound that cats makes, not the meow thing, the shh thing. So it's a distortion unit, and it's based on the same foundation as Shape2 Advanced. So even if Shape2 Advanced isn't has nothing to do with distortion really, it has to do with low-end compression. But I used wave shaping in Shape2 Advanced, and I was curious how that sounded if you use the whole spectrum, not just the low end. So I tried the algorithm, and it was so nice. It wasn't perfect, but it was very nice. So I started to tweak it a little bit, and then I got to something that I really liked. So let's go to Fras. And to make it easier and make it more compatible with different DAWs, I named it F-R-A-S, Fras. So if you search for it, you use an A, not the Swedish ä. So, yeah, that's it. But anyway, why do you need another saturation plugin? Because I know you have like a ton. I own a ton. I have bought so many over the years, and yeah, a lot of them are good. They create distortion in different ways and pleasant ways, and you can use it for different things. But one thing that I miss is distortion that acts like a chain of analog devices, not a specific device. Because I think this is where a lot of developers go the wrong way. They try to emulate hardware as if they were standalone devices. I mean, which they are, because you can buy one and put it in the rack, and in that sense, it's a standalone. But I hardly never work with analog stuff where you just use one device. I mean, situation like that can happen, but even if you do that, you have a AD and a DA. No, sorry, a DA and a AD stage as well, because you're going out from the computer and into the hardware, and then you're going back. And that loop that introduces a lot of things. You probably use some kind of leveling of the signal so that your hardware can work with the signal, and just by doing that, you actually change a lot of how the analog stuff reacts. So the device in itself it's not a standalone piece of hardware that you can just use as standalone. An analog chain always includes a lot of components. And if you try to emulate one specific device, you miss all of that things that happening around. So that's why I like plugins that simulate a whole signal chain. Those are often more, they resemble an analog workflow better than just a compressor or just a distortion unit or whatever. So I often use plugins like that. Maybe I just use the compressor in a mastering plugin that emulate a analog chain, but just because of the other components actually are in there makes a difference than just using a plugin that emulates an analog hardware. Well, okay, that's enough of the rant. So why does this resemble more of a lot of devices? Well, the distortion in itself isn't that special. I mean, I like the algorithm, and I like the distortion that it creates, or saturation, or whatever you want to call it. So that's cool. But the thing is that I'm copied the envelope following thing from Shape2 Advanced and apply that to the distortion. And I also added this control that's called live, which will add another decibel or two of movement, dynamic movement, so it reacts dynamically to the incoming signal. So it will pretty much accelerate or exaggerate the distortion when there's a kick, for example. So it will distort that more than a normal plugin would do, because normally it just reacts statically to the incoming signal. So sure, a kick that has a high peak will be distorted by more because of its a higher peak, but it doesn't react dynamically to changes in the audio, which this does. And you can use the dynamic bypass that's pretty much the same as in Shape2 Advanced, but in this plugin you use it very differently. You use it to shape where you want the distortion to end up. And so that can be in between peaks, or it can be just the peaks, or it can, you will see how we can do this. So let's start with this, using this pretty static. So I'm gonna take away everything that makes this dynamic, and we're gonna oversample it 2 times. That's another cool thing with this approach of creating distortion, is that it needs very little oversampling to get rid of pretty much all audible aliasing. So 2 times is enough. There is aliasing still, but you can't hear it. It's below the threshold for what we can hear. Then you can oversample it a couple of more times if you want to. But we start with that. And all right, the envelope is at 0. That means that doesn't apply the distortion according to the original envelope. It still does that in the sense that it will react to, I mean, it's not a constant distortion. It reacts on what's coming into the plugin, like any distortion unit. Gain stage, this is just a boost. You boost the signal by, I don't remember how many decibels. I think if you put this on ×3, I think this is 30 decibels of pushing the signal into the wave shaper that creates the distortion. But then you attenuate the signal at the other end, so it's gain compensated. So we're gonna just listen to, and I made a boring loop. Let's start with this bypass. This is what the loop sounds like. Nothing special at all, just a boring loop. All right. Let's apply the distortion, and let's just listen to that. And I'm gonna start with the low setting and boost it up so you can start to hear how it sounds. This wave shaping, it's what should I say? It doesn't create that much high end, so it's more of a, it's what I like it's a kind of distortion that I like. So this is Johannes distortion. All right, so this is pretty much with these settings. This works like any distortion plugin. Really, I could probably find something that would sound exactly the same. Or similar enough for me to use to get the same effect. Let's start to use the dynamic section. So this means that I need to work a little bit, but you just listen and watch what I'm doing to implement all the dynamic, how we will react dynamically to the signal. Like this, for example, all of a sudden we have taken something that is really, it's pretty distorted really, but we made it work and made it way, so this starts to get pretty subtle. I mean, you can still hear that it's distortion. I'm trying to exaggerate the effects in the demo, but I know that I'm a mastering engineer and I'm in a studio where I hear a lot of details. So if you're on small KRK speakers in a bedroom, you maybe don't hear all the differences. I don't know. So use headphones as the best way to hear all this stuff. All right, let's introduce some difference into this as well, which I like to do. I like to often push things a little bit into the sides so that the mid doesn't distort as much, but you get that excitement in the side channel. So the stereo image kind of gets a bit higher. So I'm gonna do that, and then we're gonna talk about all the different controls. All right, so I introduced a little bit of more of the effect is a bit higher in the sides, and that kind of creates a little bit of yeah, more space in the audio. All right, let's talk about all the different controls. If you use Shape2 Advanced, then you recognize some of them. The thing is that you use them very differently when you're using this plugin. For one, this is more of a creative tool. It's not something that you use in mastering for fixing things. I do use this a lot while mastering to create a certain feeling, but it's not a mastering plugin per se. It's more of yeah, it's like a creative effect, and I can see it being used a lot while mixing on individual instruments, but you just want a little bit of that color. All right. The look ahead, there's this thing, this is version 1, so there are things that I'm gonna change in upcoming versions, and look ahead is one of those. It does start to look into the future, and you can kind of make the plugin react on things that hasn't happened yet, but I want to connect more stuff to it so you can move around the distortion in a, yeah, more. So let's say that the kick hits, and then you want the kick to trigger something that comes a little bit later. So the distortion that comes is delayed. That would be really cool to be able to do that. Then you create a kind of this delay, but instead of actually delaying some sound, you just get like an answer with the dynamics from the distortion. That would be awesome. And you can kind of do that, but I want to, yeah, develop that further. That's one thing. Another thing is that the mid-side matrix in this is placed post the plugin. So it starts with distorting everything, and then it goes into the mid-side matrix, and you can mix in either the more of the sum or mid or the difference or sides in to the signal. And I would like it to be both ways, so yeah, that you could actually split the signals beforehand and distort the sides and the mid simultaneously, but they will sound different. So that looks more like you usually do in hardware, while the way I did it with this version is more, maybe not a digital way, I wouldn't say that, but it's not, you don't see this in an analog workflow in the same sense. Maybe for a whole chain, but not for individual hardware in the chain. So yeah, all right, enough about that. Let's just talk about everything. So we start with the envelope. This will apply the distortion pretty much like Shape2 Advanced. So if this is at 0, then it won't do anything. But if you start to implement the envelope, then the amount of distortion follows the envelope of the original audio. This means that it will distort kicks and other things, other hits that are high in peak level will be distorted more, or it's a better way to say that the other elements will be distorted less. Actually, everything will be distorted in, except for when it's completely silent, then it won't be distorted. But it's like exaggerate the dynamics of the track. So this is the first thing you could do to exaggerate the effect. Let's actually do some settings so that we can listen to that in the delta of that sounds. So here we go. This is the delta. That was extremely subtle. But what it does is that it's a wet-dry control for the distortion, because the plugin will divide the signal into the dry element and the distorted element. So the distortion won't be applied to the actual signal. The distortion will be applied as a signal chain of its own, just containing the distortion, and then it will blend it together with the completely dry signal again. And this envelope only controls the distortion part of the signal. So it's subtle, but together with the other controls, you will start to hear that we can control this dynamically very well. Maybe I'll change things like this, how it works in a later, because right now it's very much like in Shape2 Advanced, which it's not always what's good for low and it's not always good for the wideband. So yeah, I will probably change more. They are changed a little bit, but I will probably go further in upcoming versions of this. Let's use the other dynamic elements and see if you can start to hear those. We use life next, which also is very subtle. Pretty much do the same thing. It exaggerates the envelope of the original signal, but it does it in another way. So let's keep the envelope like we had it and distort this. It got a little bit more obvious when I was boosting a bit more, so there's more distortion in the signal. So that adds another movement, and then we come to the last thing that affects the dynamics, and that's the wet and dry and bypass controls. They are the same as in Shape2 Advanced, as I said, but here you can use them very differently. So and with different settings as well. So we start with, I'm still in delta, so we listen to the delta signal. Actually, I'm gonna turn on the black and white thing so that you can see when the plugin is active and when it's not. All right, so now when it's silent, that means that there will be no distortion added to the signal, and when it's distorted, it's distorted. So all of a sudden you can use the detection and the response controls way. Yeah, you can use those more creatively than you do in Shape2 Advanced. So now this is more of painting when you want the distortion to occur in the signal. Right now we have a fast attack for detection and release, and detection, that's the controls the speed of the meter around here, where you set the threshold from where the plugin will be active or not. So when the signal goes above this thing here, oh, I can't zoom for some reason. Yeah, okay, yeah, I'm in the, never mind. When the signal goes over where this is set at, then the plugin will be active, and when the signal goes below, then it will be inactive. And this controls that. Let's just play around with that so you can see how that affects the speed of this thing here. I think you can imagine how you can use that to make the distortion, when the distortion should appear in the signal. Let's bring that back to about here. So I keep it pretty fast, way faster than I do in Shape2 Advanced. Usually Shape2 Advanced, and I want this to be a bit slow, but with Fras I often work with really fast settings. And the response is when the threshold goes above, then the response sets how long will it take before the distorted signal is blended in 100%. So it goes from 0 to 100, and this attack sets that will take 1 second, or that will take 1 milliseconds. So you set that with this, and the release is the release for that. So how long will it take when the signal goes below the threshold? How long will it take before the distorted signal is completely mixed out from the project? So let's have a listen to how that sounds, and we can listen in delta for this. It's amazing how you can make the signal just live with this plugin. So it's more of a, I actually use it as a compressor, and I know that I commented on something on Facebook that Nick wrote. So that I'm getting to how you work with it as a compressor, and it's a little bit too much to say that it is a compressor, but you can do the same effects that I often want to achieve in mastering with a compressor. You can do that with this, and you can control the dynamics of the saturation, which means that you have, it's a really cool. I haven't seen this when any other plugin really. So that's why I'm so excited about this. Why I'm excited about a distortion plugin. That's crazy, really. I mean, I probably own at least 100 distortion plugins. So it's pretty amazing that I find this to be unique. I didn't thought that in 2025 you could create a distortion thing that would be unique in any way. Well, okay, that's about that. I like this plugin. I mean, I guess you can tell that. All right, let's talk about that a little bit. Or first, we can just talk about the other settings. We have talked about look ahead. The look ahead looks into the future and make the plugin react on things that are coming later. And it goes up to 100 milliseconds, like in Shape2 Advanced. Envelope, you introduce some of the original envelope with how the distortion will be applied. So you follow that. Envelope release sets the release for that envelope, so you can have it fast. So the distortion, that's maybe if you just want to distort the transients of something. Gain stage, you push the signal into the wave shaper, but it's gain compensated, so you won't make it louder. You just add more distortion. Oversampling, I usually have it at 2 times oversampling. That's enough. That's even enough for mastering really, but while mastering I usually set this higher because it doesn't cost that much of CPU, so I do that. And the dynamic bypass, we have talked about that. The below control, that's the same as in my other plugins when I use this technique, and it sets the level for the dry signal. So you can make it you can attenuate those sections, or you can boost them a little bit if you want. And this is where it comes in that you can use this as a compressor. So we get to those later. The sum and difference, that's mid-side, but I usually use the term sum and difference because I think they describe the function better. Mid-side is more of the microphone technique, while some difference is more of the technique when you apply it in the the same math really, but you don't have microphones. So I usually use that. I know that most people say mid-side for that as well. I'm fine with both really, but they named sum and difference in this plugin. The shape, there's 2 shapes really, but there are a variation of both of them. And this is something that I usually don't do because I think it's a bit silly. But variation, that makes the left and the right channel react a little bit differently. So it's kind of what people usually do when they try to emulate analog hardware. And I usually think that isn't that effective, if you like. I think it's as often like one of the bad things of analog, but it's also one of the good things because you get that width of stuff if you used right. And I actually think that I succeeded with the variation 1 and variation 2 in this plugin. It actually makes a little bit of difference. Let's listen to that and see if you can hear that in Delta. Now it's so much going on with all the dynamic stuff. So I'm gonna turn the dynamic stuff off so that we work with something that's more that's active all the time, so we can listen to the difference of this distortion. And this is in Delta, so we just listen to this distortion. Yeah, I like var 1 as it says. So var stands for variation and STA stands for static. So static, that means that it's the same algorithm for the left and right speaker. The variation, then there's small differences in how the distortion reacts, mostly dynamically to the signal. So it's not exactly the same curve that's used in the wave shaper. They are a bit different, and the same thing with the other. We can listen to the other distortion type. I like variation 1, the shape 1, the most because it's softer. The second wave shaping algorithm in this adds a little bit more of high end. It's still, I sometimes use that, but it's yeah, it's not as unique, I think, like in the version 1. It sounds like this, and this is in Delta as well. Yeah, you can hear that the first variation is a little bit softer, if you like. And you can hear that the level goes a bit up and down, and that's because I have a loudness algorithm implemented in this. So that's, I actually gonna remove this button because I realized that what this is doing when it measures the loudness, the perceived loudness of the signal, and adjust for that, so that this distortion it always be perceived as the same loudness as the dry signal. That's a huge part of the DNA of the plugin. So I think I'm gonna remove the button, but right now you can disable this, and let's just do that and see how that sounds. With these settings, I get something that sounds way louder. So yeah, but more distorted as well. But I think actually it works better with it activated. But that's up to you. And the makeup, which I had fun with. I don't remember what I was thinking about, but there was something fun with writing makeup like this. Instead of in one word, but never mind. I don't remember the joke right now. It was funny at the time when I did it. And then you have the dry wet control. It's just a dry signal, and you can, so if you overcooked something, you can back it off a little bit if you like to do things in parallel. This plugin kind of works in parallel anyway, so it's always parallel since you have the dynamic bypass and stuff. But you can attenuate the effect a little bit if you want with that. And that's it. Yeah, and the black and white control. This is Bob's control. It's because he got annoyed when the interface got black and white when the plugin is bypassed. I actually like it, not as much in this plugin as I do in Shape2 Advanced, because in this plugin it doesn't matter in the same sense as it does in Shape2 Advanced. But I kept that just because I could. All right, I think I talked about all the settings. So yeah, let's talk a little bit about this compressor thing. What you can do with that. I'm gonna dial in some settings here. We're not gonna do that much. Let's do something like that. Maybe something like this and see how that sounds. Okay, so now I have set it up so that it reacts dynamically on, it adds the distortion dynamically according to the signal. There's a little bit of look ahead, so it reacts in front of the events that are coming. But I have set the attack a little bit, slowed that down a little bit, so I make up for that look ahead a little bit. But that means that the effect will probably be when you actually get to 20 milliseconds later and there's a transient there, the level will be higher than if I didn't use a look ahead and a short attack time. So that's what I did with that. And yeah, nothing special. The effect is applied dynamically, and that's cool. Now, the makeup gain, that's placed post the loudness compensation algorithm. This means that if you boost this, the signal will be higher. So you need to compensate for that if you do that. But the cool thing with this is that you can use this as a compressor. You can also use the below control together with this control to create the same effect as you would with compressor. You can either use it as an expander or compressor. I often use it as an expander, but I also often use compressor in mastering like an expander. So you pretty much try to not affect the first hit, but then I try to open up things post. So compression is a very complicated issue because yes, you compress things. That means that you attenuate things that are high in level with a compressor. But if you use that with a slow attack and then a bit of makeup gain, then you can actually use it as an expander. And I find that most mastering engineers expand stuff with compressors rather than actually compressing, even if what they're doing is compressing. But since they are adding a little bit of gain, that means that the signal will be more dynamic post-compression than before, which is kind of weird because compression is pretty much to reduce the dynamic range, but whatever. So you can do the same thing with this. I'm gonna play around with that. So I'm gonna let the loop play and you just try to follow what I do. I'm gonna do some extreme settings so you can hear this as well. I think you can hear that. Boosting the signal. So part of the thing that you hear right now is that I'm actually boosting the signal. So it's kind of a ugly trick when you think it sounds amazing. But this change, even if you render this out and you loudness normalize this, the life that you bring into the signal with this actually follows. It's just not as extreme as it sounds when you just bypass like this. We can do that later on, so that's okay. Let's do it the other way around. Let's boost the dry signal when the signal is below the threshold here, and let's attenuate the signal when it's over. So we just do the opposite from what we are doing now, more of a traditional compressor. That means that we do it like this. We boost in the signal 6 decibels when the threshold goes over, and we attenuate the signal as it goes below the threshold with a decibel or so. See how that sounds? as you can see, you can have a lot of fun with this, even if this is no, I would never use settings like this. But you can use it as a compressor. And what I found is that I often start a mastering session. I probably done some EQ, and then I bring up a compressor and start to tweak that. And I have a hard time to get to the point where I actually like the result. Then I put on Fras, and I just dial something in, and it sounds better. It's just I just get to the point where I think this is the way I want it to sound faster using this approach, which is not a compressor, but I do the same thing as I do with a compressor with this. I just work faster with this. So I really like you to try that. And the distortion part of when I use it like that, I don't think about the distortion part as much, even if this is a distortion plugin. I usually just add a little bit, so which also starts to looks more like an analog compressor. It doesn't add that much of distortion. It's just some kind of a little bit of feeling that it adds to the signal. It's not extreme at all. So this is what I usually use this for. I think I use it more as a compressor than a distortion unit. But while I do production work, then I actually use this a lot on kick drums, just to soften it up, to make it sound, softer. And then I use it more as a distortion unit. So I like this plugin a lot, and I'm almost afraid of releasing it because I want people to rave about this, but I'm not sure that people will, because I know that the way I use plugins often is different how other people use it. So I'm a bit afraid, but I want you to like this. So download it. There's a demo, and there's it's in the download hub for patrons, and there's a demo, and it's an amazing plugin that turned out way cooler, better, and useful than I thought. It was just an experiment from the beginning. So there you go. That's Fras. Now I'm off to lunch, and then I need to do 8 DDPs on the afternoon before it's Friday. Okay, see you later. Bye bye.